Yo guys, I want to talk to you about letting people in and dreaming bigger and throwing out the idea of the timeline that you think things have to occur on, and throwing out the idea that if things grow and develop quickly that it's got to be painful, because it often doesn't. What I've experienced in my life is my moments of hesitation have often led to more pain than any mistake that I could have made if I was all in. It's a really fascinating thing. And when I used to ride BMX bikes when I was younger, when I was a teenager, it was the case as well, where often it was like when you'd lock up or you'd freeze or you'd hesitate that you would have the worst crashes. Not necessarily if you just fully committed. Now, in relationships and in business and any of these areas where there's a huge growth factor occurring and there's multiple parts moving, it seems to be really important that we allow our gut feeling, and we also recognize that sometimes the gut feeling is being filtered through the intuition or past experience of things that were true at one point in time and are no longer true. For instance, my childhood fears, I may still have them, but are they still dangerous? Are those things that I was afraid of still dangerous now? No, because I have a different skill set, a different capacity. I'm not who I once was. And when I own and embrace that, then there's no reason for the fear. Fears become potential dangers, and those potential dangers aren't necessarily scary. They're just practical issues to overcome, but they don't carry the same potential charge. So this is how it often is in relationships too, where we step into a new level of development or growth, and our nervous, I don't know what it is, whether it's the nervous system or the subconscious or whatever, is like, okay, this isn't familiar to me, and so I'm going to shut down. But what often happens is that's because we expect something to go wrong because it did in the past, and that expectation can actually create the thing we're afraid of. What you need to be able to do is this wonderful, mystical, strange thing of shifting your internal state, even though you don't have a reason to. You don't have evidence yet of why you should feel differently. All you can do is focus on what you want to create with such clarity and with such felt essence that you end up providing that scared feeling in your body with evidence in the now that you are actually able to have a different experience. And you can use your imagination to do that. You can use your imagination to trigger that process. You can to a degree will yourself to see a beauty which has not yet arrived in the world. And that is a practice, and that is the most it's like mushrooms, neurogenesis. It's the ability to see things in a new light, even though you don't have a reason to, simply because you open yourself up to what you don't know and what could be. And you decide, even if this doesn't work, this is what life shows you if you don't decide it. Even if this doesn't work, I'm still going to have to do this. I'm still going to have to subvert my expectations. I'm still going to have to become someone who I want to be. If you hold back and you do create that past scenario, and you treat the people who trust you as if they're not worthy of trust, and you treat yourself as if you're not worthy of love and openness, and you treat yourself as if you're not worthy of rapid growth and expansion that feels safe, then you're going to end up losing things. And once you've lost them, you're either going to end up in a downward spiral, or you're just going to choose at a certain point to switch that spiral into an upward direction by having a perspective and making decisions based on who you want to be, not based on who you have been. I'm speaking this from experience. I'm not just saying this because it sounds nice. I've had experiences that have taught me this, and those experiences have been very, very heavy. So I'm sharing it with you because what I've learned is that you need to the extent that you're going deep, you also need to visualize and remember and have faith in the potential for something which is equally lofty. And when you're in lofty places, to some extent, you need to remember the depths that you've come from and why you've put yourself in that lofty place, or why you've achieved what you've achieved. You have to remember that When things are going good, it's because of what you did when things were really tricky. It's because of who you became. It's because of the decisions you made to rise above your circumstances, even though you had every reason not to. There is a fine line between perfectionism and always wanting better, and also recognizing, hey, I've done a lot better. Like, I've actually done great things in the past. Notice the difference between, oh, I'm not where I want to be, versus, oh, I've done so much to get here. Notice the difference. Which one gives you more of an incentive or more of an energy to take care of what you have and to appreciate the seedlings of life that you're currently growing? Which one gives you more energy in your body to want to weather the storms and to create something beautiful and to turn everything that you're scared of or that's triggering you into something that's kind of funny and kind of beautiful and kind of creative, like raw material for the next thing? Is it, I'm not there yet, or is it, look how far I've come? Look how far I've come. Look how far I've come, and look how far I will continue to go if I trust in my ability and if I back myself and I trust that this life that I'm receiving right now can and will be more beautiful than my fears make it out to be. I deeply, deeply hope this is helpful for you. I hope that you remember when you're going through challenging things that sometimes the door you are looking for is not the one behind more and more strength and more pain tolerance and more suffering. Yes, it is true. Yes, it is true that having pain tolerance, having capacity, being able to suffer and not put it on others can save us at times. It's also true that that can cause us to internalize pain and it can sort of hurt our health. Willpower in that sense, that harsh, gritty willpower, does have a limit, even though it's good to have available. And the limit is not every door is opened by strength. Some doors are opened by compassion. Some doors are opened by dreaming. Some doors are opened by realizing that things don't have to be the way they were or seem to be now. Things can be different, and that making that choice, making that decision for things to be different, you can put a lot of beauty out into the world. You can bring more love to the world than you ever have. You can feel more love in your heart. You can help more people. You can forgive those who couldn't help but hurt you. You can forgive yourself for the things that you couldn't help but do that hurt others. You don't just have to be compensating for the stuff that's been so difficult. You can choose to live a life where you embrace joy as well. Joy is one of the things that we suppress so often because we're afraid that if we're truly happy, even in dire circumstances, that will somehow hurt other people. I've been afraid that if I was super happy and super content, that somehow that would mean that I didn't see or respect the pain that others were going through. It's not in spite of pain that we decide to be joyful. It's because of pain that we decide to be joyful. It's not in spite of suffering that we decide to love or forgive. It's because of suffering that we decide to love and forgive. We're not bypassing the pain. We're not bypassing the suffering. It's because we feel it and understand it that we choose to create something different. And there's a difference between that, which I think is wonderful, versus choosing not to acknowledge and choosing to walk away from and choosing not to cradle the pain that we've caused ourselves and others. When we abandon social bonds, when we choose not to respect one another, when our joy comes genuinely at the expense of others because we're deciding to completely overlook something that we promised them, or when we're aware that they're not in a good place and we are connected to them directly and we choose to do something in the knowledge that it's going to hurt them deeply, that's a little bit different, you know? Then when you're just like, oh, I'm going to let go of the guilt, it's like, hang on a sec. People do have boundaries for how much they can grow, and we do need to be aware of that if we want to maintain social bonds, okay? But in terms of what you're creating and in terms of what you're giving yourself and giving the world, that's different. So we can hold the pain, we can hold the suffering, we can acknowledge it, and we can choose, because of that suffering, we can say, I will honor this. I will honor this by making something so beautiful that becomes the fertilizer for the new. And it's when we skip that honoring, it's when we skip it, when we choose not to see ourselves and one another, when we choose not to recognize how much we've been through to become who we are, when we skip that process, that's when there's an issue, because that's when the bypassing occurs. So I'm not asking you to bypass anything. And I'm also not asking you to dwell and stay stuck in some place that's kind of like purgatory and that's not helping you and not helping others. I think that we can do both. I think that we actually need to do both. And it's to the extent that we can meet our pain and without denying it, choose to also create something very, very, very beautiful. That's the extent to which we grow and serve and remember what matters. So I think that's all I have to say today. I think that's all I have to say. One more thing. So for me, this trust thing has been very challenging. In parts of my life, I've had this knowing of what I was capable of, but I've also struggled to trust it and surrender to it. I've struggled to accept that I'm going to possibly get hurt, but that's okay because I am capable of getting hurt and still being okay. I've followed the what if this happens instead of the even if this happens, things will be okay. And yeah, it's caused me to mistrust the love and the opportunities that I've been given and then to sabotage them. And I need to forgive myself for that. And as I forgive myself for that, I recognize that all of that drama and all of these things that we go through, all of these loops and impediments to our growth, it's not that they're unnecessary, but they only become necessary to the degree that we're not willing to trust in who we are. It doesn't always seem easy to trust in who you are, but the irony is it's always easier than needing to be reminded of who you are by going through the ringer. It doesn't seem to make sense to choose the path of least resistance to support yourself and to be kind to others and to be truthful and only speak what's necessary, like in conflict, for example. It doesn't seem to be the easy way. It's definitely not the familiar way, but it ends up being easier. The process of walking that talk is not always the same as living, is just talking it. So I'm not giving you any advice there, but it just seems to be the case that most of the time the drama that we create doesn't, strictly speaking, need to be created. It seems to be a psychological drama that we then end up physically inhabiting. So instead of a psychological drama, knowing that the mind is just the mind anyway, it's not inherent base reality, give yourself a little bit of space and wiggle room to choose something you haven't chosen before and to have a laugh and to keep dreaming. Yeah, I think that's it now. All right. Catch you guys later.